We've pulled together a stack of sources that look past, the golden age glow of early radio.
Right. We're focusing instead on the brutal economics, the fierce corporate battles.
And the surprising legal chaos that actually built the industry. It's quite a story.
Our core material today gives us a really rare perspective, a study published way back in 1925.
Right in the thick of it.
Exactly, right in the thick of the consumer boom.
Yes.
It's called Economics of the Radio Industry. And what's great is this isn't looking back decades later. It's a contemporary assessment.
Assessing radio as a public service, a communication agency.
And crucially, a disruptive market force, even then.
And the opening premise of that 25 source is just huge, isn't it? It claims radio fundamentally, profoundly revolutionized human standards of space and time.
Yeah, leading to an enlargement of mental horizons, as they put it.
It suggests this new tech just almost overnight shrunk the world, changed how people thought about distance itself.
But here's the paradox, and it's fascinating. To the public, say in 1921, the popular rise of broadcasting felt completely instantaneous, like it came out of nowhere.
Just boom, everyone has a radio.
Right. But when you dig into the source material, the underlying technical development, the corporate maneuvering, that was anything but sudden.
It's slow.
It was a contested, decades-long slugfest, really, for control, for patents.
Okay, let's unpack that non-spontaneous part then. When we talk wireless, Guglielmo Marconi, that's the name everyone knows.
Sure is.
But our sources are, well, pretty clear. He was the great commercializer, the system builder, not necessarily the inventor from scratch.
Precisely. The history is complex. The sources acknowledge foundational work by many predecessors, inventors like Morse, Edison, Branly, Slabby, people experimenting with conduction, induction, electromagnetic waves.
So Marconi's genius wasn't the initial spark.
His genius was taking those, disparate scientific facts and merging them, building a single, reliable commercial system, something you could actually sell and deploy globally.
And before it was a living room luxury, radio was pure utility, critical utility. This is where the story really gets its teeth, I think.
Absolutely. We see the East Godwin lightship reporting damage via wireless back in 1899.
Wow, that early.
Oh, yeah. Or the SS Princess Clementine flashing news. It had run aground in 1901. It was, first and foremost, an emergency infrastructure.
And the event that really cemented it, that moved it from experiment to requirement, that was the SS Republic collision, right, in 1909.
That was the big one, the collision with the SS Florida. Wireless was absolutely critical in saving hundreds of passengers.
Hundreds.
That single success really forced the hand of governments internationally.
Yeah.
They started requiring radio equipment, operators too, on ships carrying, a certain number of people.
It's a classic pattern, isn't it?
Yeah.
Major infrastructure change driven by a life or death crisis.
Yes, exactly. And while crisis was the catalyst, the commercial interest, it was already bubbling away.
Like what?
Well, back in 1899, the system was used to report the international yacht races for the New York Herald. Instant news. And famously, Queen Victoria used it that same year. Communicating with her son, the Prince of Wales, who was ill, they passed 150 messages in just 16 days.
Instant mobile communication, but for really high-value uses at first.
Precisely. And then that early utility gets violently accelerated by global conflict. World War I.
How so?
German submarine cables were cut. Suddenly, you had to rely on the airways for long-distance communication. That pressure just fueled massive, rapid investment.
In both wireless telegraphy and telephony.
Yes, and alongside that, the rapid evolution of the key component, the electron tube, or the valve. So that brings us from the technical utility side, really, into the corporate battlefield. Because Marconi, having successfully commercialized this thing,
Naturally wanted to dominate.
he sought to enforce a global monopoly, and they did it aggressively.
How aggressively? Like, what did they actually do?
Well, they basically played chicken at sea. The British Marconi companies flat out refused to let their stations, coastal or ship-based, communicate with any vessel that used rival German equipment.
Wow. So if you're sinking, but you have the wrong brand of radio.
They might not talk to you. Their argument was intellectual property gave them the right to choose, but it created this impossible, dangerous situation for shipping lines.
Putting corporate control over safety.
Essentially, yes.
But legally, I mean, if they held the patents, wasn't that technically their right? Where did that break down?
It broke down at the geopolitical level. The German government saw this as Britain trying to do with radio what it had already done with submarine cables, achieve total dominance.
That.
They protested to other nations, and that led directly to the 1903 Berlin Convention. Its specific aim was to regulate wireless internationally and, frankly, to overthrow that threatened British monopoly.
Okay, so that was the international mess. But the American situation sounds like it was even worse. A total labyrinth, especially around that key piece of tech, the vacuum tube.
The Audion, yeah. That's where the confusion just peaked. The U.S. patent rights were a complete minefield because different competing companies owned patents for different parts of the tube. Imagine needing 3 separate licenses just to make one working light bulb.
One for the glass, one for the base.
One for the filament. It was kind of like that. Utterly impractical.
Just for clarity, remind us what the Audion, the vacuum tube, is actually doing in this process. Why is it so central?
Okay, so the Audion, or the triode vacuum tube, it's arguably the heart of modern radio. It was the first really successful device that could do 2 critical things.
Which were?
It could rectify the radio wave, basically turn that high-frequency signal into an audio signal you could actually hear, and crucially, it could amplify it, make it stronger.
Amplification. That's key for distance.
Absolutely. It's what allowed long-distance, powerful, reliable broadcasting and receiving. Without it, radio stays very limited.
So if the Audion is essential, but nobody owned the whole patent, how did anyone ever build a consumer radio set? It seems impossible.
Well, this patent chaos led directly to the government basically stepping in and saying, enough. They invoked public necessity.
The government forced them.
There's a compelling quote we found from the U.S. Bureau of Steam Engineering, January 1920. It states flatly that cross-licensing agreements were a public necessity. Why? To ensure the market could actually be supplied with tubes, they essentially forced the companies to share their toys.
And that political pressure, that necessity, it led straight to the formation of the giant we all know, RCA. The Radio Corporation of America.
Formed in December 1919, and RCA immediately started consolidating power. They acquired critical infrastructure, like the big Marconi and Tuckerton transoceanic stations.
But RCA wasn't just one company initially, right? It was more like a consortium.
Exactly. A collective born of necessity, supported by those cross-licensing partners who bought stock. You had General Electric, Westinghouse, AT&T.
Even United Fruit Company. That seems random.
Yeah, United Fruit had significant coastal radio operations for their business. They all held major stakes, pooling their IP and capital to create this single dominant force.
And we can really see the future direction of the company and maybe the whole tech industry in their financial shift between, 1921 and 1924.
Oh, it's astounding how fast it happened. It's a huge insight. In 1921, transoceanic communication, that's the old point-to-point message business, like telegrams.
That was still the majority of their income.
Over 51% of RCA's total receipts, yeah. But just 3 years later, by 1924, sales of broadcasting equipment, the consumer electronics side.
The radios people bought for their homes.
That had absolutely exploded. It represented 92.5% of their total gross income.
Wow, 92%, that's incredible. It means the company flipped almost overnight.
From being a business moving messages for other companies.
To being a business selling products directly to the public. Like going from being Western Union to being, the first major consumer electronics brand.
It really highlights the massive commercial force that was just waiting to be unleashed. Once that cross-licensing deal removed the legal logjam on the vacuum tube, the consumer demand was enormous. The industry just scrambled.
And that scramble, that explosion into the consumer market, it explains the boom. But it also led to some serious problems. Quality control issues, business practices, things that sound incredibly familiar for any hot new tech today.
Absolutely. The radio boom hit right around the post-1920 depression. Suddenly, you had scores of frankly inexperienced businessmen jumping into the radio market.
Selling easy money.
Pretty much. They saw this high-demand item and rushed in, but without really understanding the technology or the specialization needed.
It sounds a bit like early radio might have been the 1920s version of, vaporware sometimes.
Yeah.
All hype, not much substance.
Well, the market got flooded with what our 1925 source bluntly calls inadequate radio sets. And poor salesmanship, too.
Inadequate how?
Sets advertised to reach Europe that couldn't even pick up the nearest local station. This kind of thing led to widespread public disgust and irritation by late 1922.
So how did the industry even survive that initial wave of, junk and broken promises?
It survived because the underlying technology was genuinely transformative. People wanted it. But the industry had to figure out how to actually make money sustainably. And advertising, that wasn't the quick fix people thought it might be.
Oh, the advertising problem. This is a really interesting point in the 1925 report, the philosophical difference they saw between print and radio ads.
Right. Print ads, they argued, are passive. They often appeal to the subconscious. You, the reader, choose whether to look at them. They're on the sidelines. The source notes the reader is not annoyed, but is often even gratified.
Okay, you might see something useful.
Exactly. But radio is immediate, it's personal, it's in your living room. If the advertising is direct in your face, it's immediately considered obnoxious because the listener can just snap, tune it out, go elsewhere.
So jamming commercials in like they did in print just didn't work. It was fundamentally incompatible with the medium, at least back then.
Well, it was economically disastrous at first.
Yeah.
Our sources mention AT&T's station, WEF. In 1923, they were charging a pretty steep $10 a minute or $400 an hour for airtime.
That sounds like a lot for 1923.
It was. But even with those high rates, the total revenue they brought in from advertising was less than half of the station's operating expenses.
Wow. So advertising simply couldn't pay the bills yet.
Not even close. The real money for companies like RCA was still in selling the apparatus, selling the radios themselves.
And even selling the equipment, the hardware. That was a nightmare too, right? Because of how consumers viewed the product. It was classified as specialty goods.
That categorization is really key to understanding the market. It wasn't an impulse buy like groceries.
Something you pick up on a whim.
No, it meant the equipment was bought infrequently. Consumers usually made a special effort to visit a specific specialized store. Often these stores weren't even on the main high street, maybe on better side streets.
Why?
Because you needed specialized sales expertise, someone who could explain how it worked, what you needed. Education was part of the sale.
And then there was the seasonality problem, which sounds really weird to us now. Sales slumped in the summer.
Dramatically. In late spring and summer.
Why?
Well, the perception back then, and there was some truth to it, was that atmospheric static was much worse in warm, humid weather.
Interference.
Right. And people believed the signal range was reduced. So who wants to buy a radio when it's going to sound crackly and maybe not pick up distant stations?
What were the suggested fixes for that?
Things like building better portable sets, for camping trips in the summer, and building more powerful broadcasting stations to just blast through the noise.
And all this instability, the dodgy sets, the summer slump, the lack of ad revenue, it made financing a huge headache too.
Oh, yeah. Installment selling, like payment plans, was really difficult because radio styles were changing so fast, new models coming out all the time.
So you'd be afraid to commit.
Exactly. Consumers were hesitant to sign up for a multi-year payment plan if they thought their expensive new set would be totally obsolete before they even finished paying it off.
Makes sense.
The source concludes that installment plans only really work well once an industry becomes well standardized, when that fear of instant obsolescence goes down.
And that lack of standardization, that chaos, it eventually forced the whole industry, including the legal side, to mature. We mentioned earlier how radio immediately challenged the existing communication tech, the cable companies.
Yeah, the challenge was immediate and direct. Now, the source does note that for purely commercial point-to-point stuff, radio telegraphy dots and dashes was still seen as superior for a while. More certainty than fuzzy voice calls.
But the competition was real.
Oh, absolutely. Radio competition directly forced the big cable companies to slash their transatlantic rates. They went from 25 cents a word down to 20 cents matching the radio rate.
And they hadn't lowered that price for how long?
35 years. They'd held that 25-cent rate steady for 3.5 decades. Radio broke that pricing power.
So the tech forced price competition. But to really grasp the nature of the invention itself, the thing driving all this change, we kind of have to jump forward past the market chaos again. Jump into the courts.
It's a great transition because market chaos, that lack of stability, it always forces people to re-examine the foundations. So we leap ahead 2 decades to the U.S. Supreme Court.
The highest court.
The highest court. The case is Marconi Wireless Telecom v. United States, decided in 1943. And this case looked directly at a key Marconi patent, Claim 16 specifically.
What did that cover?
It covered the tuned two-circuit system, really essential for early radio transmission for selectivity.
And the big question for the court was, did Marconi truly invent this system from whole cloth, or was he refining something already known?
And the Supreme Court found the claim invalid.
Invalid after all that time.
Invalid. They ruled it was anticipated by prior inventors. They specifically named Lodge and Stone. The court's reasoning was crucial. Priority of invention goes to the one who can show they first conceived the invention.
Not necessarily the one who made it famous or commercially successful.
Exactly. The immense commercial success that Marconi achieved, building this global empire that couldn't save the pattern if the core idea was already out there, anticipated by others.
That's a pretty staggering judgment looking back. It's basically saying the man whose name is synonymous with wireless didn't originally invent one of its core systems.
It really reflects the judges grappling with the nature of invention itself. They acknowledge that invention is rarely a single eureka moment, a bolt from the blue. It's usually an evolution.
Building on what came before.
Right. And they noted the danger of reconstruction by hindsight, where a great discovery seems obvious years later. But even acknowledging that, they had to look at the prior art, the original documents.
And they found the basics were already known.
They confirmed the foundational components, the ideas were already disclosed. They even pointed out that the critical structure of the vacuum tube, the filament and plate, creating unilateral conductivity that was known way back from Thomas Edison's 1884 patent.
Edison knew the structure.
He did. Though, crucially, Edison was using it for electrical measurement, not for the rectification and amplification that actually made radio practical.
So it's like Edison laid down a piece of the puzzle, Lodge and Stone anticipated the circuit design, and Marconi was the one who put it all together into a working commercial system.
That seems to be the picture the court painted. It reinforces that idea. A great invention is almost always the culmination of an antecedent process, building on the work of others. So, looking back across our sources, we've seen radio make this incredibly rapid shift from being a literal lifesaver, rescuing people from shipwrecks,
into this chaotic, often frustrating, but ultimately world-changing, profitable consumer market.
And that transition, it was only really possible after massive corporate restructuring, like the government-nudged formation of RCA.
Right. Born out of that patent necessity.
And it immediately challenged powerful, established infrastructure, like the cable network, forcing price cuts they hadn't made in over 30 years.
So the key takeaway for you, the listener, seems to be this. The long-term value, the impact of a new communication medium isn't just about the cleverness of the technology itself.
No, it's defined just as much by its social application, how people use it, the effectiveness or messiness of its market structure.
Which often starts out messy, poorly financed, full of bad actors.
Exactly. And maybe most critically, it's defined by the legal framework. Who gets to own the idea? Who controls the patents?
And that leads us right into our final provocative thought, building directly on that 1943 Supreme Court ruling about Marconi.
Yeah, the court declared that Marconi's huge breakthrough actually stemmed from things others had already disclosed, already described.
It just confirms that maybe the most difficult challenge, especially in an age of rapid technological change like ours, is legally defining where true protectable invention really begins.
And where powerful commercial improvement or system building ends. Where's that line?
So consider this. How does that historical conflict, the fight between the claim as a foundational patent and the messy reality of prior science, how does that still shape the biggest tech monopolies today? How does it play out in the battles over intellectual property we see constantly, especially when companies acquire huge portfolios of patents for components they didn't actually invent themselves?
Nothing to think about.
Thank you for diving deep with us.
See you next time.